Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to introduce House Bill 1520. For the record, I am Bob Wary, representing Hillsborough District 13, the great town of Hudson. As everyone here should know, Article 11 of the New Hampshire Constitution discusses elections. Previous versions of Article 11 explicitly spoke on having the proper qualifications, and the current version of Article 11 still talks about voting by qualified voters. But what is a qualified voter? Several constituents have expressed concerns about non-resident voting in New Hampshire, and this bill is an initial attempt at providing one possible mechanism to address this concern. Some of my colleagues might argue that non-resident voting is not a problem, but I would contend that this is a significant problem that undoubtedly defies easy detection as long as the non-resident does not concurrently vote in multiple states. If such a voter votes in multiple states simultaneously, our Attorney General has a very good record of catching such fraudsters. However, public testimony from Representative Prout noted that 6,540 individuals presented an out-of-state driver's license using same-day voter registration to vote in the 2016 general elections, and only 15.5% of these voters subsequently received a New Hampshire's driver's license within a 10-month period. This suggests that potentially thousands of non-residents are voting in New Hampshire elections. The U.S. Supreme Court has also recognized that non-resident voting is a concern. In Dunn versus Bloomstein, the threat of colonization is cited. What is colonization? The court states the main concern is that non-residents will temporarily invade the state or county, falsely swear that they are residents to become eligible to vote, and by voting allow a candidate to win by fraud. Surely the prevention of such fraud is a legitimate and compelling government goal. But it is impossible to view durational residence requirements as necessary to achieve that state interest. So how does this potential non-resident problem get addressed? There are a few potential options. Under Title 42 of the U.S. Code, under the resident requirements for voting, federal law prohibits durational residency requirements as a precondition to voting for the offices of president and vice president. However, it does acknowledge a potential 30-day state residency clause in subparagraph E by allowing a U.S. citizen who has moved to that state to vote for the president and vice president in his or her state of prior residence. Historically, this dates back to the Voting Rights Act amendments of 1970 when this residency clause was established. So a 30-day durational residency requirement would be possible as a voter qualification and might serve as a possible deterrent to non-resident voting. In such cases, the state might want to make provisions for enabling U.S. citizens who have recently transferred into New Hampshire to be able to vote exclusively for the president and the vice president, or perhaps find a means to facilitate their ability to vote by absentee ballot in the state of their previous residence, as the federal code allows. I would mention as a side note that our current system of voter qualification does, in a way, disenfranchise New Hampshire voters. What do I mean by that? For example, an individual over the age of 18, a U.S. citizen who claims domicile in New Hampshire by means of temporary housing can register and vote in New Hampshire elections. However, New Hampshire individuals who find themselves in other states during other elections are not afforded that sort of equal protection to vote in those states. In such a circumstance, the current system punishes the New Hampshire resident and, oddly enough, rewards non-resident individuals claiming domicile in New Hampshire. So there's that durational aspect. Another possible approach is to address the potential non-resident problem with a state citizenship provision. Is there such a thing as state citizenship? Well, several court cases recognize the concept and its role in establishing voter qualifications. So such a concept is neither new nor unheard of. So why take an oath to New Hampshire? An oath is part of the naturalization process to become a U.S. citizen. A few other states have a similar oath, and I believe Ms. Tantarelli from the always nonpartisan and unbiased League of Women Voters of New Hampshire will address this aspect, so I'll let her describe that. I appreciate her diligent research on that topic, but my concern is whether this oath would be constitutional. Article 1 of the Bill of Rights of the New Hampshire Constitution states, all men are born equally free and independent, therefore all government of right origin originates from the people, is founded in consent, and instituted for the general good. Similarly, Article 1, Part 2 of the same Constitution states the people inhabiting the territory formerly called the Province of New Hampshire do hereby solemnly and mutually agree with each other to form themselves into a free, sovereign, and independent body politic or state by the name of the state of New Hampshire. So a New Hampshire citizen oath could establish the consent and mutual agreement, respectively, of the various Article 1s of our Constitution. Dunn and Bloomsdon further states that states have the power to require that voters be bona fide residents of the relevant political subdivision, and that an appropriately defined and uniformly applied requirement of bona fide residence may be necessary to preserve the basic conception of a political community and therefore could withstand close constitutional scrutiny. So as an attempt to address this potential concern for the colonization fraud of non-resident voters, this bill is proposed. I'm open to any constructive amendments, and I'm willing to take any questions. Thank you for your patience and your time.
Questions from the committee? Representative Bay, sorry, I saw Representative Lane's hand moving, but I think she pulled down.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Are there other states that require state citizenship card for naturalized state citizens?
I haven't researched all the other states yet, but no, I don't know the answer to that. So.
Follow up. So to get this citizenship, sorry, Mr. Chair. I think that's mine.
No worries.
So to get this citizenship card, some of us have familiarity of the process of becoming naturalized U.S. citizen.
Mm-hmm, sure. What
is the process of becoming a naturalized New Hampshire citizen? Who do you go to? Who do you swear to? How do you picture the process would be?
So I picture that as with the same sort of election officials that we have now, as that being a possibility. Just as they have to register to vote, I think that process could also be worked out using election officials as well, and the Secretary of State office, perhaps.
To address the residency issue, I know some states have a requirement of, let's say, 30 or 60 days before you can register having lived in the state. And also there's the concept of better enforcement of license and registration for your motor vehicle, since you're supposed to, I know not everyone might be as diligent about doing so, but when you move to a new state, you're supposed to turn in your old license and replace it with a new license and plates. So would not either enacting some sort of like 30-day or however period, and then strengthening the enforcement of, you know, people who move and then wait a year or two to get a new license and just hold on to their old plates, making sure they completed that process within the required time frame, since that's already a requirement. Would that not be an easier vehicle for addressing the residency concerns?
Thank you for your question. It assumes that every non-resident voter does intend to be a resident, and I'm not sure that's the case based on the data that I provided earlier.
Follow-up, Representative Gill?
But wouldn't, if somebody changed their license and went through the process of paying for new registration and completed all those steps, would that not follow the same? Since I believe on the form when you sign to register to vote, you do attest that the information is correct and you are a resident. Would that not fulfill the same purpose of the residency requirement? Assuming somebody who is not serious about living in New Hampshire long term wouldn't pay all those fees and go through all that effort to change those documents.
I think there are some assumptions buried in there that people are going to be compliant, and we find that they haven't been compliant. I think if in fact they were consistent with that and did that, I think that would be a solution to this problem, but it isn't working right now. And so I'm trying to come up with another solution. I think otherwise, if we restricted IDs to New Hampshire IDs, that would be an alternative solution.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Prim O'Brien.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I have a constituent concern on this, and the question they asked was, do I have to be born in New Hampshire to be able to vote in New Hampshire under this bill? I mean, I think I know some of the answers to that, but maybe you could discuss that in detail in your own opinion on this. And also, I'm not sure if this person was born in the United States or not. And could you talk about both of those scenarios? Thank you.
Right. So thank you for your question. So it's Article 14 of the U.S. Constitution that talks about born or naturalized. That's where the language comes from. And that is also, and maybe it's Article 4 as well, that establishes the concept of what could be either a U.S. citizenship or a state citizenship. So would someone have to be born in New Hampshire? Not necessarily, but by de facto, they would, as they would with U.S. citizenship, they would be here and would have that right or privilege as a citizen of New Hampshire. So they would be allowed to vote. If they're not a U.S. citizen, there's several bills, I believe, before that would preclude them from voting in other elections. By federal law, you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote for the president and vice president. That's been long established, actually. Some of the more recent citizenship bills that we've seen, I think, are actually closing the gap for the non-presidential and non-vice presidential elections in that element there, to my understanding.
Further questions from the committee, Representative Bang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking another question. Might someone who was not born in New Hampshire obtain New Hampshire citizenship the same day as Election Day?
Not if we have a durational residency requirement.
Further questions from the committee, Representative Lane.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. It's my understanding that under case law, that resident and domicile now mean the same thing. So are you proposing to create them to be different, or are you operating under that they're still the same?
Thank you for your question. Historically, if you look back in the New Hampshire Constitution, they talk about residential or residing, like qualifications for the senators are residing for 7 years, and I think there's a lower requirement for representatives. And so the concept of residing, at least in the historical understanding of the New Hampshire Constitution, has always been that residing applies to a durational requirement and domicile not necessarily. Over the last several years, there's been a lot of conflation of those things. But I think if you look back to the historical documents, there was a distinction at one point, and I think that distinction needs to be clarified once again to kind of address some of this non-resident voting issue.
Representative Lane.
Thank you. If we do that,
Mm-hmm.
aren't we going to have to go back through all of our statutes over the past few years and make sure, because if we create a new standard, we're going to have to go back and look at all of our other statutes on this topic.
But so the question is, will we have to go back and look through all of our other standards on this topic as applying to election law and voter qualifications, or do you mean throughout the rest of the RSA?
I guess I would say chapter 663 about election qualifications. I don't know about the other RSAs, but
Yeah.
I know that there's some in there. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much it would. I'm not sure how much of a change would be required throughout the election RSAs. I think I tried to find the ones that were relevant and applicable.
Okay.
We have, as a subcommittee, we had looked at this a little bit, and so I have been thinking about this for at least a little while. I probably have not missed all of them, and as I said, I am open to amendments. And as our good friend Senator Grady likes to say, this is the start of the conversation. So I'd like to kind of just start that conversation.
Representative C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. Are you familiar with House Bill 1115, which is in front of the Judiciary Committee? And it is a bill to codify the definition of citizen of New Hampshire to be applied throughout the state statute.
I believe that's a bill from Representative McFarland, and I think I have read through that. I think it is more around the U.S. citizenship as opposed to state citizenship. So I'm not sure that he's considered, or that the author of that particular bill has thought about all of this and its application to election law, but I am, to answer your question, somewhat familiar with it.
Representative O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question again. This goes back to the same concern that I asked about previously, and I'm on page 2, starting at line 11, where it says New Hampshire citizenship. I won't read the whole thing, but it goes on to say, following as proof of New Hampshire citizenship, the applicant's birth certificate from the state of New Hampshire, or a New Hampshire citizenship card attesting to the voter's birth in the state of New Hampshire, or an oath of allegiance to the state of New Hampshire. A New Hampshire citizen cannot be a legal resident of any other state or federal territory. So what this means is, if you are not born in New Hampshire, then you would have to take an oath of allegiance to the state of New Hampshire in order to vote. I'm just trying to make it real simple here. And what is the wording of that oath of allegiance to the state of New Hampshire?
Interestingly enough, thank you for your question. Interestingly enough, when the lawyer at OLS was drafting this, they asked that sort of similar question, and I think we could adopt the oath used for U.S. naturalization and utilize something along those lines. I think that could be a potential option. That's well established. It's also, all of government officials take an oath in order for us to assume our elected office as well, and so it could parrot that as well.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you. The 14th Amendment you mentioned of the U.S. Constitution says, in part, all persons born in the U.S. are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. How will this change the U.S. Constitution? And how do you propose to do that?
So thank you for your question. Again, I think the there are the preeminent case law, and I feel funny saying this to a lawyer, but the preeminent case law.
I'm retired inactive, so no worries there.
Awesome. So thank you. So the preeminent case law on residential duration is the Dun and Bloomstein case that I cited. That is, and you can find it. It's on the internet. It's pretty easy to find, and you can read through that. They come out pretty clear. The situation, if I can digress a little bit, we talked about Tennessee having like a year-long residential duration requirement, and so the Supreme Court found that to be too much of a barrier for the individual, and that it infringed upon an equal protection clause in terms of the right to travel between states. And then, but in ruling on that case, they did admit that a 30-day, and they had the Voting Rights Act amendment of 1970 had come out before they ruled on Dun and Bloomstein, which I think they ruled on in 72. They talked about it and recognized that the U.S. Congress had already established this 30-day durational limitation, and so they weren't going to go beyond that. And their ruling was simply that it would follow the constructs as laid out in Article 14, which they mentioned in the ruling, as well as 42 U.S.C. 1973, which established the other Voting Rights Act amendment and established that limited durational aspect. So would have no impact on Article 14. Everything that I've proposed is, I think, consistent within the confines of Dun and Bloomstein.
Follow up?
Yeah, but it's time to get moving on here. So,
I
Representative Newsom's follow up.
Thank you for allowing me this ability to continue to asking questions. I appreciate your comments, but there's no 30-day requirement in this bill. And do you think that a court would view the requirement to take an oath similar under the 14th Amendment scrutiny? Because a 30-day amendment not being here, I don't see as being relevant.
As I said, I'm open to amendments, and I think they're in researching this a little bit more since our original deadline for submitting bills. That has come to my attention, I should say. So there are other states that have oaths. I don't, and we ourselves take oaths to assume office. I think it's consistent, as I said in my testimony, with the Article 1s in the Bill of Rights and Part 2 of the New Hampshire Constitution. I don't find it in conflict with any of that. I don't find it in conflict with Article 14 of the U.S. Constitution.
Representative Lane.
Thank you. Thanks for taking this question. Are you aware that you can be a legal resident of one state for purposes perhaps of taxes, but be a legal resident of another state for voting?
So yes, that tax law and our voting election laws apparently ne'er the twain shall meet, but yes, that is a possibility. It's actually probably a part of Article 14 and the right to travel aspects of that for equal protection.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Newsom.
Thank you. Early in your testimony, you mentioned out-of-state driver's licenses. When is it, or is it possible for somebody to move to New Hampshire, have all intentions of staying in New Hampshire, but not be required under DMV statutes and everything to obtain a New Hampshire driver's license? That I think we discussed this in subcommittee last year.
Yeah, I would look under the motor vehicle registration and driver license requirements for that. I'm not an expert in that, so I'll defer to those RSAs. Mercifully, I think I'm done.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Cards just. The more you talk, Representative, the more pink cards showed up.
I'm
so.
sorry. Curse.
We had
Curse.
one, and now we have 5. So, all right. All right, let's get these in order. Hold on. Volunteer, lobbyist. Next up is Sanjeen Manohar. Oh, representative. You got to put representative on your vote.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for taking my opinions here. I obviously haven't come prepared for this. I came to testify for some other bill, but I heard what I just heard and I was just shocked. And I read the bill very, very quickly. So forgive me if I don't know if I'm not able to get the nuances of it. But this to me smacks of a slippery slope in trying to get New Hampshire residents and constituents get accustomed to the idea that there is a time to get rid of the United States and go free. So I think this could be a red herring or a Trojan horse using people invading from other states and taking our elections away as a pretext to actually program our residents into slowly believing that we could indeed cut away from the US and go on our own. And so that's my first impulse when I saw this bill. Maybe I'm completely wrong and there's a very honest reason why this is all coming through. But advertently or inadvertently, this is coming plain and clear through to me. I just read the bill and it came to me straight off. So I'm sure others might be picking this up as well. And so I thought I should use this testimony as a warning sign that we are a body of the United States. We pledge our allegiance to the flag here, and we are indivisible. That's part of our pledge. And so as a state rep, I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep this nation strong. Putin is actually celebrating what's happening here. China is fantastic coming through. They even have an AI they are even teaching AI to students. And what are we doing here? In my opinion, this is another attempt to split our nation into 1,000 bits so that foreigners can take over. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit blunt here and obviously didn't come prepared, and thank you for taking my views.
Will you be taking questions?
Absolutely.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Next up is Patrick Binder.
Hello, good morning. Patrick Binder from Manchester, and I'm here speaking on behalf of myself and Hampshire First, a citizen advocacy group. I'm here in support of this bill. I moved here about 10 years ago from California, and I would love to take an oath. Please write one. I would recommend just starting with the New Hampshire Bill of Rights. Let's just read the first 10, and that's your oath. They're great. So I think the term New Hampshire citizen, that there's 1115 also trying to address this. It comes up a lot, and it's not really well defined. So I think this is great to actually add definition to something that we use dozens and dozens of times throughout laws. And if you look it up, there's just no definition. So it's really just strengthening it. I think overall these type of moves strengthen the franchise. It strengthens voting. It makes voting more important and more powerful. And I think that's a good thing when you can do that. I do agree that there is a historical and legal definition of domicile and reside that are different and should be differentiated. Again, that strengthens the franchise, does not weaken it. I think this does work with the 14th Amendment and within its restrictions. And I do not appreciate the fear-mongering about Putin and China from Representative back there. And that's all I have to say.
Will you be taking questions?
Yeah.
Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you.
All right.
Next up is
Thank you.
Jonathan Sadowski.
My name's Jonathan Sadowski from Concord, and I'm a taxpayer. I'm raising 4 amazing kids to live here in the Granite State. I got my master's degree from Plymouth State. Lived here for 15 years, but I'm from Massachusetts. So I was wondering also, I had been about 20 years ago, I took the pledge to defend our Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. So the question for the committee would be, would my pledge of allegiance to New Hampshire supersede my pledge to defend the Constitution? And this bill just seemed that would be something that would be worth researching, but I'm just here to oppose this bill and go on the record against it.
Will you be taking questions from the committee?
Sure.
Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Next up is Liz Tantarelli from the League of Women Voters.
Thank you. My name is Liz Tantarelli. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. I'm a resident of Manchester, and I am passing around my testimony because on the flip side of the testimony is the oath that voters have to take in Vermont. And I know that the chair prefers we not pass around the testimony, but I hope I'm forgiven in this case. Oh, I'm forgiven by somebody back there. Okay. Anything that makes voting more confusing, more difficult, more obscure is bad. And I know that this committee has the same goal that the League of Women Voters does. That is to make sure our elections are fair, free, understandable by the voters. So since you all now have your copy there, the back side of it is from Vermont. It is one of 3 states that have some kind of voter's oath. It is not a Pledge of Allegiance. And frankly, when I first read this bill, I was infuriated and I said, I have no allegiance to New Hampshire. I may leave anytime I wish. I've spent something like 50 years living in New Hampshire. That does not mean I have a Pledge of Allegiance. So look at the bold print to see what a Vermont voter has had to pledge since 1777. The language is a bit hard to parse. It's kind of old-fashioned. You solemnly swear or affirm that whenever you give your vote or suffrage touching any matter that concerns the state of Vermont, you do it so as in your constant conscience you shall judge will most conduce to the best good of the same. Yeah, you got to read that 3 times. As established by the Constitution, without fear or favor of any person. So essentially it says, when I cast my vote, I'm doing it because I think it is for the good of the state and the people of Vermont. Well, isn't it true that whenever we cast our votes here, we're doing the same thing? We're thinking it is for the good. Now, we can differ on what that vote is, but isn't that why we cast a vote? And the last part, without fear or favor of any person, just means without coercion, excuse me. Well, duh. If we can't say we're voting for the common good without feeling we're being forced to do so, if we can't do that without an oath, aren't we in trouble? I mean, what's wrong with our elections if that's not true? I'm going to try to calm down at this point. Because, as I said, I got infuriated by the idea of a Pledge of Allegiance. As Representative Newsom pointed out, in the U.S. Constitution, it is implicit that if one is a U.S. citizen, one is also a citizen of the state in which you reside for legal purposes. So this bill is utterly unnecessary. This body passed a law requiring proof of U.S. citizenship 2 years ago. It is now in effect. Voters are coming to understand what they need to provide to prove that. We have had proof of residence required for a long time. Voters are understanding what that means, but I cannot see how we can explain to voters what New Hampshire citizenship means, that you need to get a card from the Secretary of State. No such card exists. You need to take an oath of allegiance. No such oath exists. And what's going to happen if you pass this? And we have to explain this to voters. Well, look at the very bottom of the first page of my testimony. The fiscal note for this bill is $2.5 million for the Secretary of State to do the necessary voter education. And frankly, I don't believe it can be done for that amount or any amount. The Representative Menaher, whom I've never met, but I intend to, said he was shocked by this, as I was when I first read it. And I noticed that the sponsors of this bill are also sponsors, some of them, of House Bill 115, which defines citizenship, and of some other bills. And I too wonder if this is setting the groundwork for another secession bill, such as we had in 2022 and 2024. And if so, then we're in really deep trouble. I'm sorry, Representative Barry, I went way over my 2 minutes, but you can see my passion. I'll behave for the rest of the meeting. I will gladly take questions if there are any.
No need to behave. I enjoy the fireworks. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Louis Cote. Oh, you're reading a letter. Sorry, Olivia. I didn't read the whole card. My apologies.
So this is from Lois Cody of Manchester, New Hampshire. Lois is 79 years old. She's lived in New Hampshire since 11 months. She was not able to vote until she was 21 years old, but she was born in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. So she's just across the border, but her parents moved before she turned 1. She considers herself loyal to the U.S. Constitution and the New Hampshire Constitution, and in other words, rule of law and government for and by the people. This bill is a direct violation of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and she again emphasizes that that says we are citizens of the United States and of the state which they reside. And she said requiring people being born who are being born out of New Hampshire to take an oath of allegiance in order to vote is unnecessary. Is this a product of those who support New Hampshire seceding from the Union or from our United States? Please ITL this bill. I just want to take a moment of privilege. My 16-year-old daughter asked me what I was doing today. I told her about this bill, and she goes, "Mom, that's a bad idea." And I was like, well, you were born in Concord, New Hampshire. In 2 years, you can turn 18 and you'll be able to vote. And, you are born in New Hampshire. She goes, but it would impact so many other people who weren't born in New Hampshire. So words of my daughter as well. Happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Last up is Sarah Ortiz, Representative Bay. Can you grab the blue sheet for me? Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Again, my name is Sarah Ortiz, and I'm the Public Policy Fellow with Open Democracy. I'm here today in opposition to HB 1520. HB 1520 places additional undue burdens on eligible New Hampshire residents who are simply trying to register to vote. This bill creates unnecessary paperwork hurdles for voter registration, requires voters born in another state swear an oath of allegiance to the state of New Hampshire, and creates a new requirement of New Hampshire citizenship. These are new barriers to voting. Under this bill, a voter could be disqualified even if they own a home in New Hampshire, pay property taxes in New Hampshire, and intend New Hampshire as their voting domicile. Many lawful New Hampshire voters split time elsewhere while maintaining their domicile here. Similarly, we have many students who live and work in New Hampshire. These people already have the constitutional protection to vote where they have established their domicile, yet with this bill, they could potentially lose that right. Finally, HB 1520 places an unfair burden on women who change their last name. Women may need their birth certificate and state ID, plus marriage certificates and divorce decrees. Men generally will not face these same paperwork burdens. This creates unequal treatment at registration. This bill could also harm our domestic violence survivors. I myself am a domestic violence survivor. I was married in California and divorced in Massachusetts. Under HB 1520, in order to vote, I would need my California birth certificate, California marriage certificate, Massachusetts divorce decree, and a driver's license. Many survivors don't have access to these documents for a multitude of reasons. Many survivors flee with little to no belongings and are generally not thinking about grabbing marriage licenses. And even if they did think to grab these items, abusers will often hide or withhold vital documentation and records to maintain control over their victims, leaving the woman to request the documents. In my case, getting these documents would have cost $68 plus processing and mailing fees. Eligible voters like myself should not lose access to the ballot because I cannot obtain paperwork safely or in a cost-effective manner. HB 1520, as we heard earlier, also has a fiscal impact of more than $2.5 million. That is a significant taxpayer cost for a system likely to create delays and barriers, not efficiency. Ultimately, HB 1520 would impose unnecessary and unequal burdens on eligible voters, undermining fair access to the ballot. I respectfully urge the committee to oppose HB 1520. Thank you for your time.
Will you be taking questions?
Yes.
Are there any questions from the